You're listening to Turn on the Jets Live.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Turn on the Jets Live. I'm your host, Steven Zantz, joined by my co-host, Zantz Russo. We're joined by a very, very special guest, second time on the show, Brian Costello of the New York Post. Brian, it's great to have you back. And Steven, it's good for you to finally talk to Brian because you weren't with us last time. Brian, how's it going?
Good, guys. I'm in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So, you guys, I'm tougher to get when I'm in New Jersey when I have two kids, a lot of stuff going on. But down here, I got nothing happening until tomorrow.
Steven, what about you? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Excuse me. Obviously excited. First time talk with Brian. Brian, thanks so much for jumping on. But let's hit the ground running. So obviously this is we just talked before the show a little bit. You've never really experienced a camp like this with a guy of Aaron Rodgers' caliber. So kind of what's the feeling? How's it been for you overall, kind of witnessing? I think, obviously all of us kind of we see a rejuvenated guy, a guy that's really, truly happy in a better place and in a good spot and happy to be here. Is that what you're seeing throughout camp, and what has his kind of presence meant to this team, and really what's the general feel over there?
Yeah, I mean, I've never covered anyone like him. I was around a little bit for Favre that year, but I wasn't the beat writer then. And I've covered a lot of guys where there was hope and there was excitement, right? Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Zach Wilson, Mark Sanchez. There was a lot of excitement, about those guys, but it was all hope. This is like real. This guy's a resume, and you know what to expect. And he makes throws in practice that make you say, wow, almost every day. Him in the red zone has been something to watch. And he throws from all these crazy angles, and, you're like, where's he throwing the ball? You don't see the guy open, and all of a sudden the guy's open. So, yeah, it's been fun to watch that. And, the excitement around the team is more than I felt in years. Maybe 2011, maybe the last time there was this much excitement, because 2016 was a little bit, but I think still people had reservations about that team. But 11, they thought that was when the last time I remember people talking about the Super Bowl. So, yeah, it's different and it's exciting. It beats some of the years I've shown up for training camp and been like, oh my God, they might not win a game. 2017, 2013, I remember that feeling, and they ended up winning a lot more games than I thought. But the beginning of camp, there wasn't much hope. Obviously, this year, there's a lot of hope and a lot of expectations.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Steve, but I want to touch on specifically, you said, like, watching him in the red zone, which in the last 2 years, I think we all noticed where Mike LaFleur had to get very creative and almost gadgety, right, for lack of a better term, in the red zone. And that was a big struggle of the Jets. Like, what do you see that just kind of makes Aaron Rodgers stand out in that part of the field where it could be something that we could really see improve this year?
There's no panic, and he can throw from all these different arm angles. And, down when you get in the red zone, things get a little tougher because it's just a smaller space. There's not as much space to operate. So the, defensive backs don't have to cover 40 yards. They've got to cover 20. And it gets harder down there. But you just see him. There's no panic. He kind of he can move slightly to his right, slightly to his left, and find something. And like I said, there's times where you're like, wow, where's he throwing the ball? And then all of a sudden the guy comes up and catches it. And the Jets are pretty good about tweeting out those ones. You guys have seen it, I'm sure, in the beginning. There's one to Garrett Wilson. I remember one to Corey Davis. He's hit the tight ends a bunch in the red zone. It just feels like those are the ones that really stand out to me, the way he operates down there. And if you look at the numbers, a couple of years ago in Green Bay, they were ridiculous in the red zone. So I think that's going to be where you see a huge change. And obviously last year, all you have to do, look at the Minnesota game, right? They lost the game because they couldn't score in the red zone. And this year, if they're in that situation, I think they win the game because I think they score some touchdowns there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that excites us because it was so painful to watch the offense, especially when Mike White was injured. And then we got down back to Zach and Streveler and whatnot. But I do want to go back to Zach because I feel like people have been talking about him improving this offseason. Is that legitimate? Do you think he's actually improved from what you've seen in his first two camps, or do you think it's just practice and you have to see it in a game?
I'd like to see it in a game, to be honest, because, look, practice, there's no pass rush, right? You're never going to get hit. And Zach is a very, very, very talented guy, right? He wasn't the number 2 pick in the draft by accident, right? There's skill there. There's definitely skill there. The problem has been for him some confidence issues, just operating the offense. So I would need to see it in a real game to truly believe it. But there's positive signs. He's made some great throws in camp. He's had some good practices. But again, it's practice. Like I'm not one to breathlessly report what happens in training camp. I know others do. I know you guys eat it up, but like to me, it's like it's not real football. It's just not, and it doesn't. I've been fooled plenty of times. Like I go back to like 2019, I think it was. Ty Montgomery was here, and it was like, oh my God, Ty Montgomery is going to be this huge weapon. They're going to throw him to him all the time at the backfield. Like him and Le'Veon Bell are just going to combine for 2,000 yards. It's going to be great. And then he was a ghost when the season got there. Nothing happened. Or go back to Tebow. It was like that with Tebow. So you really need to see it in game. It's just different animal completely when the games start. I don't want to poo-poo the Zach stuff. He's definitely had good moments. Like I think he's relaxed.
That's good.
And I think he's got his confidence back. Just what struck me most last year, because whenever Zach struggled his first year, and I'd say up to the New England game last year, the second New England game, he still was kind of defiant and cocky and not unfazed by it. After the Jacksonville game, he looked like a beaten man. Like he was just shot. And he had no confidence. Like they couldn't put him back on the field. And he's back. He has the confidence again. You can see that. And I think this was an ideal situation for him, learning from Rodgers, and Rodgers seems to have embraced it. So I do think it's positive around Zach, but I'd like to see it in a game before I say, oh my gosh, yes, he's definitely improved.
I was going to say, I feel like because they let go of Streveler, who is the preseason king, and they haven't gotten any other backups aside Boyle, they seem pretty confident to roll with him as the backup. Would you rule out a potential quarterback addition, or it's definitely going to be Zach?
Oh, it's definitely Zach as the number 2. I mean, they've said that since March, basically. They've been like, he's going to be the number 2. It's hard enough. They knocked him off from being the face of the franchise to being the backup quarterback. You can't now bump him down to 3. Like, he's better than Tim Boyle, too. He's better than Chris Streveler. There's no question there. I don't know if they'll add a 4th quarterback in terms of that. All that would just be a camp arm, just they decide, hey, because I've been surprised. Rodgers has basically practiced every single day. You hear the term veteran rest day a lot. Like I was reading some of the Carolina coverage today, and Frankie Louvu, an old Jet, he had a veteran rest day today. Like, so do they get to a point in the summer where they're like, hey, let's give Aaron a few days off? They do stuff like that. You need someone to take the reps. So they could add a quarterback just for that reason, but it's not going to be anyone that's competing for a roster spot, I wouldn't think. Interesting,
because that's been a question that Jet fans have had because, if the season goes down the drain because Rodgers gets hurt, Zach is the guy again, and it's like we're back in 2022. But
you know what, guys, though? Like, who do you want? Like, the backup quarterback thing is always like, it ain't good. there's barely 32 of them out there. There's barely 32 starting quarterbacks. Yeah, never mind.
That's fair.
4. So, there's guys out there that get you through a couple of games, but there's no, like, if he's done for the season or something, no matter who you put out there, like it's over. So, I think Zach is the backup, and I don't think there's any question there.
And I think that's what leaves a lot of Jets fans scared, right? Is because I think at the end of 2022, Saleh came out and said he really needs a true reset, which, yeah, you said, since March, it's kind of been like Zach is going to be the number 2, but is that really a true reset? So I guess in your eyes, is this really a mistake going in there with Zach as number 2? Because obviously as Jets fans and knowing the history, he's probably going to play a meaningful snap or 2 at least, if not more, obviously. Yeah. So relying on him for that, is that a mistake in your eyes, or is that something that, you would feel comfortable rolling the dice with?
No, I think you have to roll the dice. They invested in him, right? They took the number. He's the number 2 pick. They can't just – I don't think you just kick him to the curb. And if you make him the number 3 quarterback, that's what you're doing. You may as well just cut him. Like, I do think he needs to rebuild his confidence, and you're not helping his confidence if you're now the number 3 quarterback. And who are you bringing in? Like, do you want Teddy Bridgewater? Like, I think Detroit just signed him. Like,
that was the option I think a lot of Jet fans circled because he'd been on the team before for a summer. But I get what you're saying.
Like, I think part of rebuilding his confidence is letting him be the number 2 quarterback. And when Joe Burrow got hurt, he was like, "Who's the Bengals backup?" Right? Like, you don't know who the backup quarterback is for a lot of these teams, and Jets fans saw it. up close last year when they got a run of backup quarterbacks that they faced on other teams. Like, it's not a good situation. There are very few good backup quarterbacks out there. And, I think you're fine with Zach. Is he going to, again, you're probably I think all these teams are probably screwed if their starter goes down for a long time. And I think that would be the case with the Jets, but maybe you can rebuild Zach, and you're not going to, maybe you don't win a lot of games, but maybe you rebuild him a little bit, build up his confidence if he has to play next year.
Okay. That's fair. I want to shift gears to the Hall of Fame game. I know it's not real football. It's a glorified scrimmage, but what was your biggest takeaway from that game? Because we did see a lot of the young players, specifically like Tittman, Will McDonald, even Bryce Huff, which I want to ask you about that as well. But what was your biggest takeaway from that game? I
think it was the rookies getting them time, because one of the things about this roster is it's a lot better than it's been, and the rookies aren't getting a whole lot of time in practice. Like, Will McDonald's a rotational player at defensive end, but Jermaine Johnson's in front of him, Carl Lawson's in front of him, JFM's in front of him, Huff is in front of him in some regards. So it's, he hasn't gotten a ton of work. He got a lot of work in there, so you got to see him. Tittman, I know everyone's been freaking out about Tittman, right? I think they're working him in slowly, but that was a great game for him. He got to play the whole game. I thought he played pretty well when I watched the game back. So I thought that was important. I thought Zach having a good moment and no really, really bad moments. I know he slipped on third down, but no horrible interceptions or stupid plays. I thought that was a big positive for him. He needs to keep stacking those kinds of games, and just, if he has one really good throw and just no big mistakes, I think that helps him. I thought Izzy's speed, that was on display, but I more telling than that was Salah's answer after the game about it. You can tell there's something missing with Izzy that they're looking for, because he kind of said, he has to learn, you're not going to hit the home run every time, just take the 4-yard gain. That was telling to me Salah wasn't praising him. So they clearly love his speed, but there's something missing there in the game-wise. So that was probably the biggest, and I never want to go back to the Hall of Fame game again. I know that.
So obviously you're talking a lot about the young guys and the rookies, Kaz. Is there someone that we saw in this Hall of Fame game that you think may sneak on the roster that we could be surprised by?
I'll go with Jimmy Moreland, guys, the cornerback. I look at their cornerback depth. Obviously, their starting cornerbacks are great, right? It's been well documented. Those first 3 guys, I'll throw Michael Carter in there. They are the real deal. But past that is a drop-off. And Eccles is suspended for the first game. He didn't have a good game in the Hall of Fame game.
No, he was terrible.
Bryce Hall, you've seen him. You know what he is. So, Jimmy Moreland's a guy, he just kind of shows up. I wasn't at practice today. I was flying, but I heard he had an interception today. He just kind of shows up. And if he's – when I saw he intercepted Aaron Rodgers, my thought was, he's on the field at the same time as Aaron Rodgers, right? So I don't care about the interception so much. Who knows what happened there? But that tells me he's playing important reps if he's on the field with Aaron Rodgers. So that's my kind of sleeper to make the roster. I don't know. I think that position there's not a lot of depth there.
Interesting, because for me, I feel like Eccles and Hall are decent depth, because in 2021 and even in 2020 for Hall, they actually had starting reps. So to me, yes, you don't want them playing, but at the same time, they've shown that they can at least contribute.
Yeah, there was a reason. There was a reason though that they went out and got Sauce and DJ Reed, right?
No, of course.
Right. But it was remember entering that offseason was Salah doesn't like cornerbacks. Look at San Francisco; they just find cornerbacks. And we went to the Senior Bowl, and I remember talking to somebody from the Jets at the Senior Bowl, and they were like, we desperately need cornerbacks. These guys just aren't that good. And yeah, I do think they could play. You're right, they've shown that they can play, but I don't know. I remember Hall came in the Ravens game last year, gave up a touchdown the one play he played, right? So I don't know. I could see them looking for an upgrade over those 2 guys, and especially Eccles now. It complicates things. He's suspended for the first game, so I wouldn't be shocked.
would you consider Brownlee a lock to make the roster based on his camp so far, or are you not so sure about that?
No, not a lock. My joke in Canton was I was asking, was he going to get fitted for his jacket while we were there, or did he have to go back to get fit? Guys, you remember David Clowney, right? Like, there's always there's a guy who pops in training camp, and you give him a lot of money for an undrafted free agent, so they like him. They said they were gonna draft him, but yeah, I don't think he's a lock. I think he has a good shot because I'm not sure who the guys are beyond the veterans that are there, and they are gonna need some guys to play special teams. But if he makes the roster, I would keep expectations tempered. Like, I don't think he would play a lot of offense.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because at the end of our last episode last week, we kind of went through some of the preseason Hall of Famers. Like, Clowney came up. Ryan Spadola was another name that we mentioned.
I had a famous tweet about Ryan Spadola that people don't let me forget. I said he's going to come back to haunt the Jets. They cut him. I loved Ryan Spadola.
As did I. I was heartbroken when they cut him. Because I want to switch gears a little bit here and move to the trenches. So really, I think I want to ask you, A, how good can this defensive line truly be? And then B, how much of a concern is the offensive line, and how do you feel how do you feel that is going to end up shaking out come the opener against Buffalo?
Okay, the defensive line, I think, would be great. I think they'd be one of the best in the NFL. We saw it last year with what the Eagles did, how important that can be in today's NFL. So and obviously Saleh in San Francisco had that defensive line rolling, and it was a huge part of their success. So I don't know how you keep all of them happy. And I've said this to Saleh, because I'm like, I don't know how and he gives me coach speak, but like, I think it's gonna be tough. You got a lot of guys. There's a lot, especially defensive end, defensive tackle. I think is not that big of a rotation, but my only question on defensive line is stopping the run. I thought losing Sheldon Rankins was a big loss. I thought that was a big loss for them. Al Woods, obviously, he's got a good resume. He's older. We'll see. He's playing in a different defense he's ever played in before. Quentin Jefferson, I don't really know that well as a player, so we'll see how they fare against the run. That'd be my only question mark with them, but I think they're going to get after the quarterback pretty well. Then on the offensive line, it's the biggest concern on the team. There's some days I've watched where I'm like, oh my gosh, doesn't matter if you have Aaron Rodgers, if this is going to be the offensive line, because he's going to be under pressure. And really, it's the tackles. I think there's questions. Laken Tomlinson didn't have a good year last year. Center, I think Connor McGovern is serviceable and fine if that's who you're going with. And AVT has looked great, so he's the one guy you're not concerned about. But tackles, I don't know how this is going to shake out. I think Dwayne Brown's going to be left tackle, but I need to see him on the field, and he clearly is worse than they let on. Right? Mm-hmm. There were guys saying, "Oh, he'd be ready for training camp," and now we're deep into training camp because they started so early, and he's still not on the field. And I think Saleh said the other day it's another couple weeks, so something's going on there. He must have had more medical procedures than we were led to believe. So, you need to see him, but I would pencil him in at left tackle. Right tackle, I don't know. Max Mitchell, I would have said, or Billy Turner, but neither one of them have looked good. I don't know if they can really roll into the season with them. Then Becton, I know everybody wants Becton, right? But to me, he's like a pitcher right now in baseball. It shows up at spring training. I used to cover baseball. And you can't show up and throw 100 pitches, right? You got to build up. That's what they always say. You got to build up. So the guys throw 1 or 2 innings, then they go to 3-4 innings. Becton hasn't gone past 1 inning yet, right? So there's no way you can think he's playing 60 or 70 snaps against Buffalo on September 11th right now. He couldn't make through six snaps the other night in the Hall of Fame game. Mm-hmm. So you need to see it from him. The talent is there. There's no question about it. He's the most talented guy out of that group. But I just don't know if he can stay on the field. And I don't know if he can convince the coaches that they don't trust him at all. So he's got to win some people over. And he's just these preseason games are just huge for him. Huge.
So actually, I was going to ask this, and then we have a comment here from Alex too, who's going to ask the same question. So Brian, is there any consideration here, do you think, from the coaching staff, where if they truly want to put the 5 best guys out there, You start Dwayne Brown if he's healthy. You have Tomlinson on the left. You do any combination of the three of Schweitzer, Tittman, and McGovern at center and right guard, and you kick AVT to right tackle. Do you think that's even on their radar at this point, or was that only last year when they were absolutely in dire need of this?
Yeah, they've been pretty adamant that they want AVT to stay at right guard. Going back to March, I can remember asking Saleh about it, and they say, "Oh, he can be an All-Pro right guard.
Yeah,
he can be a good right tackle. He can be an All-Pro right guard." But I would think about it. Somebody asked me who the best left tackle on the team is. I said AVT. Right? I just think he's the best. I think he's the best offensive lineman.
It's a good
and he
answer.
showed it last year that he can play everywhere, and he showed it in college he can play everywhere. So, yeah, be on my radar. Like, I'd be thinking about it, but I haven't seen them do it in practice. Now, there are walkthroughs that we're not allowed at, that they do stuff. They can be doing stuff in secret that we have no idea about. They did that last year with AVT, right? We never saw that in practice. In season, we watch a lot less practice, but during like the warm-up periods, we never saw AVT at tackle. They kept that under wraps. So they could be working on it without us knowing, but there's been no indication that they're going there. I mean, so Saleh, a few weeks ago, I asked him about the offensive line, and he pointed to this week. He pointed to these practices and the practice against the Bucs next week as when they sort of had to sort things out with the offensive line and figure out what they had. So I think in their minds, like these 2 weeks are critical, and they'll probably reassess at some point here and try to figure out, what combination they're going to go with for the season.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they know by now, because they had an extra week of camp because of the Hall of Fame game. But do you think there's a realistic chance that they trade Becton, basically right before cut day, or do you think he's like pretty locked into a roster spot at this point?
No, I think they could trade him. I think they could. I think if they I don't know what they get from him. Like the problem with trading him, right, is the only way he's going to have trade value is if he actually shows something in the preseason. And if he shows something in the preseason, you want to say, all right, we're going to put him at right tackle. That's the dilemma there. But if the choice is cut him or trade, I don't know if they can get anything on the trade. If it's down to that, if it's pretty clear that they're going to cut him, I think it'll be tough to get much for him.
But I feel like you see all the time with like guys who are going to be cut that they try to trade him, and then you're like, well, how do they have leverage if a team knows you're going to cut him if you can't find a trade? But then it's like the waiver period is really how you end up driving up some value, right?
Yeah, like Mims, Mims, they got something for Mims, but Mims has actually been on the field. The problem with Becton is he's not on the field. I just don't, and he does have a first-round pick contract. I can't remember his exact money, but you're picking up that money if you trade for him. So I think he has to show he has to be on the field even for another team to be really interested. But yeah, you do see guys get traded. So could they get a 2025 7th-round pick? Yeah, maybe. They're not going to get anything of value from a guy back then like that. Someone said to me, "Oh, they get a 4th-round pick." I'm like, "You nuts?" Like
they would do that tomorrow.
Yeah, like
they knew they could.
They can't do that, And so I think that they would try, but I'm not sure they'll be able to do it.
That's fair.
So, who do you think the starting tackles are week 1?
Oh God. Man. I mean, I do think Dwayne Brown will be the starting left tackle.
Okay.
I'll go Billy Turner as the starting right tackle.
Oh, you're making everyone who's watching this, who's going to be listening to this, so upset. That is just such an underwhelming option because we know he's not any good. I get it that like he has familiarity with Rodgers and they like the floor. It's a high floor, but the ceiling is so low. It's just like I'd rather them just play Max Mitchell. I thought he was decent before he dealt with the blood clots last year. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, he's a tough one, right? Because here's what happens is when a guy plays who you have absolutely zero expectations for, right? He was a 4th-round pick. Yeah. He wasn't supposed to play. They threw him in there. You grade him on a curve because it's like, oh my God, it wasn't a disaster, right? But I don't know how really good Max Mitchell was last year. I think he got kind of overstated because there were zero expectations for him. And the Hall of Fame game was not good. That was not good. I think that was pretty well documented by everybody on Jets Twitter. I saw, it wasn't good. So can he bounce back from that? Sure. But I think Billy Turner just has a little bit of an edge right now.
As you can see, Car Fox commented, Billy Turner has no business taking up a valuable roster spot, which I don't disagree with, but they need as much depth as possible because we've seen this offensive line just get absolutely decimated for the past few years. Yeah. But It's a little. It's scary.
That's the biggest thing they need, guys. Is just luck that they don't have injuries like they've. I mean, it's year after year. Like since Douglas has been here, it's been incredible how many. Like I have it in my computer somewhere. How many offensive line combinations there have been? Like it's amazing. Like and if you look at like the end of the year, who the starting offensive lines are, it's just crazy. Like some of the starting offensive lines.
It's funny to me too because when Saleh recapped the 2022 season and specifically the 6-game collapse, right? Like that was the one thing that he probably pointed to more so than anything else was the offensive line shuffle, the injuries they sustained, how you simply just can't win games when you have to hold up like that. Yet, did they really do enough in the offseason to address it and to fix it when knowing you got Aaron Rodgers, who's obviously a great quarterback, but an aging one? Your priority should be to protect that. So it's kind of perplexing for us as fans, obviously, that they didn't do more in the offseason and that they're kind of resting on their laurels a little bit here.
I guess I'll give you what I get when I press, like, what would you have them do? Like the draft. So they draft, right? First round, they end up 15th after the Rodgers trade.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe the only offensive tackle they really, really loved was the kid from Ohio State.
Georgia.
Kid from Ohio State.
Paris Campbell.
Paris Campbell was here. Paris Johnson, right?
Yes, thank you, Paris Johnson.
He went to Arizona, way before they were picked. I really think he was the only tackle they loved. They did not love the kid from Georgia. Like, I know that's a great story that Belichick screwed them, but I don't think they were going to draft him. I really don't. So they really liked Paris Johnson, but they weren't getting him. You weren't going to trade up. I think he went 6th or 7th, somewhere around there. So, I just don't know. And then free agency wise, if a guy's a free agent at tackle, there's probably a reason. You could find one every once in a while. I think Conklin worked out pretty well when he was a free agent, but there aren't many tackles that become free. It's a position teams hold on to if they're getting good. So I'm just not quite sure what they could have done. I agree with you. Like in on paper, it's like, man, they really didn't improve this position very much. But I'm not sure what they could have done. And like, if you look, like it should have been, they drafted Becton in the first round. They drafted AVT in the first round. They signed Laken Tomlinson to a monster contract.
Mm-hmm.
They take Tippmann in the second round, right? So it's not like he's ignored the position since he's been here. He had the previous GMs, they never drafted. I remember Vlad Dukas was the last offensive lineman taken in the first 2 rounds until Kai. So they've tried. It just hasn't worked. I mean, at this point, Becton should be the starting left tackle, and Tomlinson and AVT should be the guards, and then you'd have Tippmann in center, and you'd be looking for one more player. But it just hasn't worked out. So I just don't know what they could have done. I don't remember the free agency class very well at tackle. What they should have done there.
The one guy,
better than Aaron Rodgers at that point.
The one guy I think was Orlando Brown, who went to Cincy. That was the one guy, but I know he has injury history, and the Jets were like linked to him, but I don't know how serious that interest was.
I'm not sure he would have come to the Jets either, right? At that point, Rodgers was still up in the air, probably, right? So he went to Cincinnati. I think guys going to Cincinnati are thinking they're going to win the Super Bowl. He'd be the one guy. He'd be fair. That'd be a fair one to sign.
Yeah. So you were mentioning how the Jets you never thought were realistically thinking about Broderick Jones. Is the Jahmyr Gibbs stuff real? Was that actually under consideration?
Yeah, that's real. Yeah, they love Jahmyr Gibbs. They would have taken Jahmyr Gibbs if he was there at 15.
Even with Breece Hall.
Yeah, the new thing is like positionless football, right? Like I think Atlanta is the trendy one to talk about that with right now with all the guys they've got.
Yeah,
I think they saw Gibbs as like just a playmaker. And that's what I think the Jets feel like they're lacking still. And maybe they hope they get it when Hall comes back. But like that was what Odell was about to me. That's what a little bit the Dalvin Cook stuff's about to me. It's not necessarily the position. It's adding another playmaker on offense. I think they feel like they need one more guy, and maybe it's Dalvin Cook. I don't know if you can count on Breece being Breece when he comes back. So, but the Gibbs thing was real. I do think they would have taken him if he was there.
Interesting, because that's not a guy that anybody thought the Jets would have taken, leading up to the draft day. And then that report came out afterwards that that's who they wanted. And then he was picked by Detroit.
Yep.
So my question to you is, like, with Cook, it seems like this is like dragging out way longer than it needs to. I saw in The Athletic that the Jets are still interested in Zeke. Do you think that that's a backup plan? Do you think they may just sign him in general, or is that nothing?
I don't think the Zeke thing's real. I haven't heard that. I know it was reported. I haven't heard that really. And they were pretty emphatic in March shooting that down. Remember, Saleh said we like our running back room. And, I mean, that was what told us it was something different with Dalvin Cook because he didn't say that with Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
The Cook thing is just money is like, when does he come down, right? I think he's a guy who was supposed to make $10 million, $8 million, $10 million this year and got cut. I think when he first hit the market, he was thinking, all right, I'll make the same amount of money. I think he's probably going to make $6 million, somewhere around there. And at some point he has to realize like that's his market and take the money. There's probably no rush for him, right? Like I don't think he's dying to get out in training camp practice. Yeah. So, he probably can wait a week or two still and see what shakes out. And at some point, I think his price just has to come down. And then, we'll see what the offers are at that point of the Jets or the Dolphins or whoever else.
So you talk about getting one more playmaker, and obviously I think that market is kind of drying up, obviously, if not dried up. But I think, if Brees comes back and he's, let's say, 80 to 90% of what he was before he got hurt last year, and obviously Garrett Wilson is healthy and takes the year 2 leap that I think we're all expecting. Like, I think most Jets fans feel pretty good about the weapons that they have. You combine the running backs, the wide receivers, and the tight ends, and hopefully Rucker kind of takes that jump as well and sees more playing time. But how do you feel? I mean, I feel like this show, you've kind of kicked us down a notch a little bit, which is fine. No, it's okay. You brought us back to reality because we're hyped up, obviously. But how good can these weapons be, especially with Aaron Rodgers at the helm? And then the follow-up question that I want to ask you, Brian, is I feel like as most Jets fans talk about the wide receiver group, Mecole Hardman is kind of a forgotten man.
Yeah.
Just what kind of dimension can he add to this offense? Like, can he be that burner that really adds that home run hitter from the wide receiver spot, like that we're hoping for?
Well, that's the term, home run hitters, right? When I'm talking about playmakers, I do think they have a lot of skill players. I think the tight ends are good. The tight ends have been really impressive in training camp. I think Lazard brings something. Corey Davis brings something to the table. But home run hitter, like you saw it with Brees last year. Even like Garrett is a great player. Garrett wasn't like, oh my God, once the ball is in his hands, he might score a touchdown. That's Brees, right? That was Brees. That was what made him. That's what killed them when he got hurt. They need a player like that, right? And Garrett Wilson is going to be great. He's going to have a ton of yards. He's going to make a lot of plays, but I just feel like they need one more guy that's just a threat to go to the house every time. Hardman could be that guy. It didn't really happen in Kansas City. Like he was more of a gadget guy. Now they had Tyreek for most of that time, so they didn't need him to be. From what I've seen, he's a great yard after the catch guy. And again, training camp, they're not stretching the field a ton. So, but he obviously, I know they were thrilled when they got him because the speed that he brought to the table.
Yeah.
So I think the offense can be very good. You got Aaron Rodgers. That's right. Like he was good with slop in Green Bay, at times. So, the problem, and I'm going to caution you now, Jets fans, right? It might take a little while. It might take some time. Like, don't panic if they don't look good in the first 2 weeks because the preseason is done. You guys see it. Like, this used to be the teams got to play, a little bit in the second preseason game. They played the whole first half, sometimes the third quarter. And the third preseason game sort of got their feet underneath them. And then the regular season was like 2 weeks after that. Now it's like they don't play at all in the preseason. Think about all the guys that are missing right now. Dwayne Brown hasn't been out there at all, offensive line wise. Garrett's missing some time now. Brees hasn't been out there at all. Lazard missed some time, right? So they need some time together to gel, and that might happen in the season. This is kind of always we saw at the Patriots, right? How many years did the Patriots start off 2-2 and have a terrible offensive showing, and everyone's like, that's it, they're dead. And then you looked up and they were 14-2 at the end of the year. They lose another game. And so that could be the Jets, right? Like, I just think it might take a little time for the offense to find itself, new coordinator, new quarterback, a lot of new pieces, but they can be good. And they can be good just with that quarterback. I don't really know that they can be really good.
I think what you're talking about totally makes sense, but you have to remember this fan base is starving for a winner. They're starving for the playoffs.
I know.
It's different when you're comparing to New England. I think Tampa Bay,
I am dreading September 12th, guys. I'm dreading September 12th because whatever happens in Monday Night Football, you guys are going to be crazy, over the top. If they win and they beat the Bills, it's going to, that's it, 17-0, Super Bowl, here we come.
No.
If they lose, the sky is going to be falling, right? It's like this every year on week 1. This year is going to be on steroids, especially because they're the only game that night. So Tuesday is going to be like crazy.
I don't know where you get this idea.
Yeah.
I mean, geez. I think Jets fans are logical, level-headed, and we don't either hit the panic button or act like we're going to the Super Bowl after one game. What are you talking
September 12th
about?
will be epic.
Yeah.
I told my bosses already. I'm like, I know that day is going to be nuts.
I'm sure you'll be on the fan, I'm sure, that day talking about what you saw.
Yes. Too bad Joe B isn't on there.
I know. I used to love when you guys would go at it. He would go after you. He'd be like, because you always defended Gase. All you guys defended Gase way too early. Like, we knew he was no good the second he got here. Like,
all right. Let's go.
Oh, here we go.
All right, here we go. Give me the team that Gase had. Give me, you guys. We're talking about playmakers. Give me the playmakers that Gase had.
It doesn't, but it's not. It's the way he operated. No, I don't care about the playmakers. He had Le'Veon Bell, who I think he misused. He was trying to.
Le'Veon Bell then went to Kansas City, so Andy Reid misused him.
No, but
and then he went to Baltimore, and John Harbaugh misused him, right? Le'Veon Bell was done. I wrote it in training camp. He was done. He could not gain a yard. He was toast.
Well, I know. In 2020, it seemed like Frank Gore was way better than him. I remember that. But
yeah.
My issue with Gase was the way he carried himself, and I felt that he always was trying to make everybody fit into his scheme versus scheming around the players. And that's a fair criticism.
That's fair.
And that's what it is. I get it. The skill position players weren't.
Like, Bill Belichick wouldn't have won with the 2020 team at all.
Yeah, well, and the 2019 team wasn't as bad as that team.
The 2019 team had zero depth, and like Robbie chosen was the number one guy. He was a decent wide receiver at that point. He wasn't number one, but I mean, they didn't like. Gase takes way too much crap from you guys, like way too much.
But we saw he wasn't any good in Miami either. It's not. We knew that it was just a bad idea. Like I'll digress. You're not going to meet a Jets fan that's going to defend Gase. There's not one.
No, I know it.
Here's what I'll say about Gase, though, right? And so, Joe, do you like Joe Douglas?
Yes.
He's like I'm neutral. Like, I don't dislike him. I don't love him. I think he's done good, but he's also
if he turns it around, though, right? You'll love him.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yes. He has the benefit of the doubt.
I think that's
Gase's legacy, right? He brought Joe Douglas here,
and we have to be thankful for that. Yeah,
not be here without Gase. I know you guys like the business side doesn't, but like the team president is here because of Gase.
Yep.
So like the throwback jerseys and all that stuff that's going on with that. That's the guy that Gase put in that job. Like he basically, in a very short time, revamped the entire organization, and I think there's been some tangible signs of payoff from the changes he made. But I understand, like he carried himself terribly. I can't defend the way he carried himself, and like he had some major public relations disasters. But I think he's a smart coach.
And I would agree. And I think what we have to realize here is that, listen, first of all, the Gase thing, every Jets fan knew it was a mistake from the start. So we weren't going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He couldn't operate with a clean slate in Jets fans' eyes. Either way, seeing and knowing what we know now, we endured 2 years of Adam Gase to get ourselves to Robert Saleh, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Douglas, which I think is the best Jets chance to win a Super Bowl that we've had in quite some time, obviously. So you think about the alternative, where I know mine was Matt Rule. Like he was going to be I wanted him to be the hire, and you look how that turned out. Not saying that it would have been the same, but you kind of say, okay, would I rather have Matt Rule and Sam Darnold, or endure the 2 years of Adam Gase, get myself to this point? And I think I choose this path 100 times out of 100.
McCarthy was the other one, right?
That was who I wanted, and it was a blessing in disguise as well.
Yeah,
man.
I think I
wrote a column at the time. There were no good choices.
Yeah,
there wasn't one guy in that class that they interviewed that I'm like, oh, that's the guy, right?
Yeah.
And Benigno killed me because I called McCarthy a retread.
Yes,
right?
I mean he is. He has a high floor. Like, you won't be awful, but he's not going to take you over the top.
But like, you also like, I'll go. Whoever was there, Sam Darnold is a wonderful guy. I wish him well in San Francisco. I don't think he's the guy, right? I just don't think you were ever going to really accomplish much with him at quarterback. They didn't give him much to work with. Obviously, it was well documented. So I think whoever was the coach would have really had a tough time in those 2 years. And then, COVID added a whole layer in 2020. That was a mess too.
That's fair.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want to digress any further. I will make this point is that I was because the McCarthy thing, I didn't want to retread. I was scared from Adam Gase. I will say the one thing where I was probably wrong was Doug Peterson, the same cycle that we hired Saleh. I was adamantly against Doug Peterson, where seeing what he's done now in Jacksonville, I will admit that I was wrong because I think that could have ended up being a good thing.
I think I'll say this about Doug Peterson, it applies to Gase, it applied to Rex, it applied to Mangini. Guys need a year off when they get fired. Right?
100%.
Peterson took a year off. You get humbled, right? You get humbled. You start to go, what went wrong there? What did I do wrong? You might go visit some training camps, watch how other coaches do it. I think that is huge. And like if I ever advised the coach, right, like I'd be like, take a year off, because Mangini went right from the Jets to the Browns. It was like that day, and he went to the Browns. He did exactly the same thing he did with Cleveland. And then Rex, same thing. Rex went to Buffalo and did exactly the same thing, because it was like, it's not me, it's them. Like that's how they always feel. Adam did that. There was not like everyone talks about the eyes at the press conference. The biggest thing to me with Gase at that press conference was he wouldn't say what he did wrong in Miami.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this guy doesn't think he did anything wrong. So like that. So I think that's huge with the coach. And like if there's another coaching search at some point, that's a big thing. Is like just a guy takes a year off. You saw it with Tom Coughlin. He talked about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that's a huge thing. You don't want to hire a guy who just got fired.
I think that's fair. I think if they become a coordinator, it's okay, and then you could hire them after. But
again, they have to look inside themselves and go, what went wrong? I think they need a year. I just don't like, this guy got fired, let's hire him right away. I don't think there's time to reflect on what went wrong. And I've covered them, and I know them when they leave. They're all like just really bitter about being fired, and I think that kind of blocks them from growing as a coach.
I think Rex was, and I think he's come around and realized that the Jets treated him well, but like in the beginning, he was very bitter. But I think now he has a much bigger appreciation for the Jets organization and always is talking positive about them, on TV.
Yeah.
So, Brian, we really appreciate the time. We have one question from a comment, and then I have one more for you. So we have one question. What do you think of the current staff from John Anello?
Good question. I think the defensive staff is really good. I think they're very good. I think they've got a lot of good guys. The offensive staff's a lot of new blood, so I kind of want to see how it goes. I thought Sal's biggest mistake when he got hired was so many first-time coaches. Right, He was a first-time coach. He hires LaFleur as a first-time coordinator. I think there was 5 guys who might have been first-time position coaches at the time. I think Hackett. We'll see how he works out. It's going to be tough. He's got Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how you screw that up, right? And I don't how much credit is Nathaniel Hackett going to get? Like it's being a coach is a tough job, man. Because when you win, it's the players get the credit. When you lose, the coaches get the blame. So, I think I'm curious to see. I don't really know the offensive staff. I'm curious to see how they are, but I think there's a little bit more experience now. Todd Downing coming in, I think, is going to be an underrated move for them. That will help. The wide receivers coach has experience. He's a little bit more experienced. I think the running backs coach is pretty good. Offensive line coach was in Tennessee. He has experience. So we'll see. But I think the defensive staff is good. I think there's guys. I think you'll see if the Jets have another really good year, I think guys will start getting plucked off that staff, for coordinator jobs. And maybe, I don't know. I've never heard Ulbrich being considered as a head coach, but I think he'd be worth consideration if they have another great year defensively. I mean, he really turned that team around. It's tough when you're the coordinator and your head, the same side of the ball your head coach came from, but I do think Ulbrich does a lot. He's not Casey Rodgers. Yeah. when Todd was here, Todd did everything, or there was some Rex did a lot at times. I think Saleh does let Ulbrich do most of the defense himself. Yeah,
it does seem that way. And I like that he's empowered both of his coordinators to, really run everything on their side of the ball. But do you have any initial impressions of Hackett just based on talking to him? Because I personally think, as bad as he was in Denver, he showed as a coordinator, specifically in Jacksonville and in Buffalo, with mediocre quarterbacks, Blake Bortles and Kyle Orton, that he can run an offense. So, yeah, I get it. And I said it was a good idea when they first brought him in before Rodgers was even close to a thing. I just think if you could make Blake Bortles look good and almost get to a Super Bowl, you got to get some credit for that. And now he has a future Hall of Famer instead, who he has a great relationship with. I'll defend that.
Yeah, the 1 year with Jacksonville was great. I ended up covering that team in the playoffs, and they were impressive with Fournette, and Bortles. I used to make this comparison and get killed. I always thought Darnold was Bortles, right? I thought that was like if
he's worse.
I think if you surrounded Darnold with the team that Bortles had in 2017, Darnold could get you the AFC Championship game, right? So I remember when he got traded to Carolina, I was on a radio station in Carolina, and I said that, and they were like, everyone just drove off the road. But, yeah, no, I think he deserves credit for that. And but it was 1 year, there wasn't a lot of other success. Yes, he had a little success with Kyle Orton. So I'm curious, but again, it's Aaron Rodgers. And I hate being like this because this was always like, well, the Gase thing was always like, well, yeah, he won with Peyton Manning. He couldn't win with anyone else. So I sort of feel like it's like that with Nathaniel Hackett. It's the 1 year with Bortles was impressive. And
Kyle Orton, those guys are nothing.
I don't remember that Kyle Orton offense being incredible. Do you have the number? Like, what was it?
No, but they won 9 games. It was Doug Marrone. They still had a good year.
Yeah.
They were. No, I'm not saying they were like lighting the world on fire.
I remember them. That was the team that destroyed the Jets in Detroit, right?
Yes.
They were good that night.
Okay. It's very true. That was on a Tuesday night. I remember it was so miserable.
Yeah, the Bills hadn't practiced all week because they were in the blizzard. They hadn't practiced. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That shows how bad the Jets were that year.
Yeah, I always reference that game because every once in a while, what was Rex killed? I think it was Saleh when Saleh lost the first year when they lost in New England. They got stuck.
Oh my God!
And Rex was like, "I never had a loss like that," and I'm like,
"Get out of
that
here!"
One, But no, I think you just have to go with an open mind with Nathaniel Hackett. We'll see.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, I don't think the Denver stuff should play into this at all. It's a different job. He's a head coach.
100%.
I don't think what happened there really bears here. Like, I am. I want to see it. I want to see what he does. I think Downing's going to have a big role in this too. I don't know. Like, Downing's been calling plays in training camp at times, so they set out. It's going to be. I think they said. So Hackett's in the booth. Hackett calls it down to Downing, and Downing calls it to Rodgers, which
is that unorthodox?
This stuff makes my head hurt. It's not like these guys do wacky stuff. Like if you remember the Gase Loggins thing, like where they was like one was calling. I remember Rex used to do. I remember Rex had a thing where it was like one guy called it first and second down, one guy called it third down, one guy called red zone, and like you'd wonder like. How do they have all these 12 men on the field penalties? And then you're like, oh, that's why.
That's why. That was the most frustrating thing about the Rex era.
Yeah, because
12 men on the field.
There's like four guys calling out the defense, and so they'd like one guy would yell one scheme, the other guy would yell another, and like they'd end up with 12 guys on the field. I don't get it, but I mean, I don't understand why one guy just can't call it into the quarterback, but.
I remember the Gase press conference too, where he tried to explain the logins, and he couldn't do it. But he's like, "Guys, this isn't hard to understand." I'm like, "Well, I think everyone in this press conference is going cross-eyed."
Yeah, like Gallo's calling the plays, and we're like, "Adam, we saw him on the sideline, like he had like his hands in his pockets, like talking to some guy I've never seen before. He didn't even have a headset on, like he wasn't calling plays. Like you can't tell me that."
My favorite thing about Loggins is how he used to throw the challenge flag. That was like his whole
yes, that was his job.
Yeah.
Really quick, Brian, before we let you go, why was Bryce Huff playing so many snaps in the Hall of Fame game? I think Jet fans were really pissed about that.
Yeah, I asked Saleh on Sunday, so he basically said that someone had to play. Right? They have all these defensive ends. They really don't have guys who are. They have young guys, but they have like Jermaine Johnson and McDonald played a lot. So I just think they weren't playing. I think he said they've only played 4 defensive ends. So I didn't double check him on that, but I'm guessing McDonald played, Jermaine played, Huff played. Who's the fourth that played? Do you guys remember? I can't remember, but it's probably somebody down the depth chart. But like he basically said like that's why he had to play. So. we'll see. I mean, it kind of was weird to me. Like, I'm like, would they think about trading him? Because he's a guy I think you could get something for. And they got a lot of guys. They got a lot, like I said, a lot of guys to keep happy. But I'd be surprised still if they did something.
I want to ask you one more on that note, and it's just real quick, Brian. But Jermaine Johnson, is he poised for a breakout year from what you've seen in camp?
He is. Again, though, I just how much is he going to play? Yeah. So he's probably going to play 20, 25 snaps, probably. I think.
Yeah, but it sounds like they want to play him at linebacker, so maybe can they move him around a little bit because he's, like you said, positional.
I don't understand the linebacker thing though. Like you're saying, like they're not going to stand him up. Like he's not going to be off the line of scrimmage. Like I haven't seen that. He's still on the line. Like I don't like he's playing defensive end. I know he was like listed as a linebacker or something, but he's going to be an edge rusher. I don't see him going off the ball. So. You can be productive. You can be very productive. Like, look, we all were like, "Oh, why isn't Quinnen played more?" That was I still don't get it. But like he was very productive playing the number of snaps he played. So they feel like a guy has more energy. So Jermaine, he's looked great in training camp. He's had a really nice training camp, and he looks bigger. I think he was a guy. Too, that just some of these guys just need a year to figure out. And he was fine last year. He wasn't bad when he played.
He had that one play against Buffalo when he stopped Josh Allen on a scramble. That was like his biggest play, and it was a huge play in that game.
What they drafted him for.
Yeah, he's very talented. So I think and Lawson right now has got back tightness. Who knows if that lingers? So I think Johnson's a guy. Yeah, he should have a big role this year, much bigger than last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all are excited about that defensive line, and but we want to see touchdowns. We no touchdowns the last 3 games of the season. We want a few touchdowns in week 1 and so on and so forth. But Brian, thank you again for joining. Make sure to follow Brian on Twitter at BrianCause. Make sure that you're reading his stuff on the post, and also tune into his podcast, Gangs All Here with Jake Brown. Brian, it's been awesome. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope I wasn't too negative.
Listen.
I feel like everything you say right now is negative.
I think we needed it, and it's good. It's you're there, and you're obviously giving us the real look at it. So that's great. I do, however, your gay standing was a little bit big, but hey, that's all right. We all have our flaws, right?
The good news is that in 40 minutes, you guys will get to watch Hard Knocks and feel great about the team because they're not going to spotlight anything negative there. So you feel good about it.
We're excited.
I don't know if that's true. They might try to create some drama. They try to do a little bit.
The Jets have final say over what's on Hard Knocks. You guys know that, right? So the Jets get to watch it. Like the Jets watch it. I
didn't know that.
Yes. So the Jets have final approval on what I think it's a kind of a negotiation. But there's going to be nothing on there the Jets don't want on there.
Okay. Fair.
All right.
So, But
it's been a lot of fun. Make sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube, youtube.com/@BadlandsTOJ, Apple, Spotify, all of it. And also don't forget to subscribe to Badlands on Patreon, and we'll talk to you guys next week.